And now, a letter from Condoleezza Rice.
Dear reader, 200 years ago, the British Parliament outlawed transatlantic slave trade, accumulating a decades-long struggle led by William Wilberforce.
Trafficking in persons is a modern-day form of slavery, a new type of global slave trade. Perpetrators prey on the most weak among us, primarily women and children, for profit and gain. They lure victims into involuntary servitude and sexual slavery. Today, we are again called by conscience to end the debasement of our fellow men and women. As in the 19th century, committed abolitionists around the world have come together in a global movement to confront this repulsive crime.
The 7th Annual Trafficking in Persons Report documents efforts by foreign governments to prevent human trafficking, prosecute criminals, and protect their victims. The report probes even the darkest places, calling to account any country, friend or foe, that is not doing enough to combat human trafficking.
The power of shame has stirred many to action and sparked unprecedented reforms, and the growing awareness has prompted important progress in combating the crime and assisting its victims wherever they are found.
Defeating human trafficking is a great moral calling of our day. Together with allies and friends, we will continue our efforts to bring this cruel practice to an end. Thank you for joining a new abolitionist movement. Together we can make a difference, and together we can build a safer, freer, and more prosperous world for all.
Unfortunately, letters, documents, and the quote-unquote power of shame has not hindered all those involved in human trafficking. Hi, my name is Ashley Waugh.
And my name is Nicole Kleckner. Based upon our research, human trafficking can take place almost anywhere around the world.
Human trafficking is a multi-dimensional threat.
It deprives people of their human rights and freedoms. It increases global health risks, and it fuels the growth of organized crime.
Human trafficking has a devastating impact on individual victims, who often suffer physical and emotional abuse, rape, threats against self and family, documenting theft, and even death. The impact of human trafficking goes beyond individual victims. It undermines the health and safety and security of all nations.
Before our research, we thought human smuggling and trafficking were the same, but they aren't. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, those who are smuggled have consented to be smuggled. Trafficking victims have either not consented, or if they initially consented, that consent has been rendered meaningless by the deceptive or abusive or domineering actions of the traffickers.
Another major difference, according to the UNODC, like Nicole said, is that smuggling ends with the arrival of the migrants at their destination, whereas trafficking involves the ongoing exploitation of the victims in some manner to generate illegal profits for the traffickers.
We have 3 examples of human trafficking:
child soldiers, forced labor, and child sex trafficking. Child soldiers. This story took place in Burma, Southeast Asia.
Kang Ung said, "I was recruited by force against my will. One evening while we were watching a video show in my village, 3 army sergeants came. They checked whether we had any identification cards and asked if we wanted to join the army. We explained that we were underage and hadn't gotten identification cards. I said no and came back that evening, but an army recruitment unit arrived next morning at my village and demanded 2 new recruits. Those who could not pay $9 had to join the army, they said. My parents could not pay, and altogether 19 of us were recruited and sent to Mingladan, an army training center."
With new weapons that are lightweight and easy to fire, children are more easily armed with less training than ever before.
Some younger than 10 years old have witnessed or taken parts in acts of unbelievable violence against their own families or communities. Such children are exposed to the worst dangers and the most horrible suffering, both psychological and physical.
Children who are trafficked into child soldiering, both male and female, are often taken from their homes, tortured, brutally brainwashed, forced to become intoxicated with mind-altering drugs, threatened with death or dismemberment if they do not fight, forced to return to their homes to witness or participate in the death or disfigurement of their own family members, required to kill friends who do not obey their commanders, and forced to watch the punishment of other child soldiers who attempt to escape. Some children who tried to escape have reportedly been boiled alive, and other child soldiers have been forced to eat the human flesh as part of their training.
Many girl soldiers are expected to provide sexual services as well as to fight.
We chose Burma because it is believed to have more child soldiers than any other country in the world. The overwhelming majority of Burma's child soldiers are found in Burma's national army. Other countries that have been cited to use child soldiers include Angola, Burundi, Colombia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Lebanon, Liberia, Nepal, Sierra Leone, Sri Lanka, Sudan, and Uganda. And despite all of the international human rights treaties, labor laws, and humanitarian laws that should provide children with special protection, the trafficking of children and the use of children as soldiers is increasing. Child sex trafficking. This story takes place in Cambodia.
Sisters Naren and Sulthi, ages 10 and 12 years, lived in Phnom Penh. Their parents agreed to deliver the young girls to a German national's rented apartment for sex in exchange for money. While at the apartment, the German man sexually abused the girls and documented the abuse on video. Tipped off by a neighbor, the girls were rescued by a non-governmental organization. They testified against the man and their parents.
According to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, the TVPA, severe forms of trafficking or sex trafficking is defined as a commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or deception, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age. A child's tragic journey into the sex trade often begins in a family struggling for survival. Cambodia is a country where the average income is less than $300 a year. Some children are sold by their own parents. Others are lured by what they think are legitimate job offers, like waitressing, but then are forced into prostitution. We chose Cambodia of all the places to cite sexual child trafficking because the topic is no secret to the Cambodian government. Mu Sak Hwa, Cambodian's Minister of Women's Affairs, stated, "I rank sexual trade, sexual exploitation of our children as on the top of my list." She admitted some 30,000 children are involved in sex trafficking. Forced labor. This story took place in India.
When Akish was 5 years old, he was playing with friends in his village when some men drove into his village and asked the boys if they wanted to see a video. The boys piled into the back of the vehicle and were driven 200 miles away. They were locked in a room days without food and were beaten. The traffickers had abducted these vulnerable children so that they would be forced to weave carpets. The boys were held captive for 9 years. 2 of Akash's friends didn't survive. One was shot while trying to escape, and the other died of untreated illness. The boys were 14 years old when they were rescued, barely able to speak. They were malnourished, wounded, but finally free.
Forced labor, as defined by Britannica.com, is performed involuntarily and under hardship, usually by relatively large groups of people. Forced labor differs from slavery in that it involves not the ownership of one person by another, but rather merely the forced exploitation of that person's labor.
There's a growing movement of trafficking for labor, according to Mark Taylor, the senior coordinator for the state's Department Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons. The global value of trafficking labor is estimated at $9.5 billion, he said. Foreign governments in the last 7 years, Taylor said, have improved their efforts to combat sex trafficking. But too often, labor trafficking is an administrative offense, not subject to criminal investigations. What constitutes forced labor is not defined well in many countries, he said, and there are often few, if any, protections for these victims.
But wait a minute, remember the letter Condoleezza Rice wrote concerning the annual Trafficking in Persons report that we read earlier? Well, the State Department listed Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and the annual Arab Emirates as Tier 3 countries, which are defined as nations whose governments do not fully comply with the minimum standards set by American law and are not making significant efforts to do so. Other countries included Bolivia, Cambodia, Cuba, Ecuador, Jamaica, Burma, as we talked about earlier, North Korea, Sudan, Togo, and Venezuela. They too are Tier 3 countries. In our research, we've noticed that human trafficking occurs everywhere.
That's why we've decided to discuss all aspects of human trafficking rather than just one specific
country, because like we said, this is a problem that's going on globally. That's why we really just wanted to take the 3 issues, child soldiers, forced labor, and child sex trafficking, because those 3 are really the main issues that are involved in human trafficking.
It is important that all aspects of human trafficking are acknowledged and do not go unnoticed. Many times it does, and justice is not brought to its victims.
There are several things you can do to stop human trafficking. You can join an organization such as the Project to End Human Trafficking, PEHT. It's a non-profit organization that promotes human rights, in particular the rights of women and children, and there are many other organizations you can join to end human trafficking. Also, you can hold a house party. The Amnesty International has created a new downloadable organizing kit that you can use to bring human rights education to your community. The kit includes guidelines for planning and hosting a house house party, discussion guides, fact sheets, and more. Or you can write a letter to your members of Congress urging them to co-sponsor the Child Soldier Prevention Act of 2007.